you're brand new to eyeshadow, or you've been trying it and it doesn't work out, let me help you out. No one taught you to do your makeup growing up? Auntie Mabes will. So follow along as we make up for lost time. Be an eyeshadow base. I'm not a person who believes in primers for most of the face, but eyeshadow primer in particular always is necessary for me personally. It helps your eyeshadows last longer, but it also helps your eyeshadows look better. Different brands will make different types of eyeshadow primers. There are clear or translucent ones that just help the makeup last longer, but there are also pigmented ones, like the one that I'm using, that give you a little bit of coverage underneath the makeup too. You'll see that the base that I'm using is quite lighter than my actual skin tone, and that's intentional on my part. Lighter colors can really help the eyeshadow pop more, and also this kind of works as, I was gonna say a natural highlight, but it just works as a highlight without me having to do anything to highlight the areas of my eyes that I'm going to want to highlight, because you'll see I take this all over the eye. I start on the eyelid, but then I bring it all the way up to the brow and kind of cover in that whole area and blend the edges to soften them as I go, so that when I go to start my eyeshadow, I more or less have a blank slate of an even pigment to lay my eyeshadows down on. Now, before we get into putting the eyeshadow on the eye, I want to go through a little bit of anatomy of the eye to make sure we know what areas I'm talking about when I talk about certain areas. Starting with our mobile eyelid, the part of the skin that covers the eye when your eye is closed is what we're going to call the eyelid. And then up at the top, right where the brow sits, we're just going to call that the brow bone, right underneath the brow. And so between those two things, we have what we might call the crease or the fold. Essentially, when you relax your face and open your eyes, there is a little bit of a fold or a crease where your skin folds under. And different people will have different shapes here. Not everybody has actually a fold if you have a monolid and things like that. Some people like me have hooded eyes where our crease is like really pronounced and a lot of our eyelid actually gets hidden underneath it. And this is where my biggest suggestion or tip about makeup is actually to follow people who look like you and share your features. It's one of the only places that I recommend following people who look like you, and I don't recommend doing that exclusively. You can know how to like adapt features or adapt to your features. But if you're looking to recreate an eyeshadow look in particular, if that person's eyes don't look like your eyes, you're not going to be able to get the same results because they're starting on a different canvas than you have. So we have the eyelid, the brow bone, and the crease. I often will also split the eye into thirds long ways when I'm talking about or applying my eyeshadow, where I'll talk about like the center, the outer corner, and the inner corner, which are pretty straightforward, I think. The inner corner is closest to your nose, the outer corner is furthest away from each other. And then of course we have our lash lines, our upper lash line and our lower lash line. And yes, I'm gonna put eyeshadow on my lower lash line. A lot of people feel like they shouldn't do that or that doesn't look good. Honestly, I used to be scared of it. I used to not want to do that, but especially with hooded eyes where I don't have a lot of real estate on my upper lash line, my lower lash line is really useful to get the pigment or the look that you're going for. So I'm going to take us through a pretty standard, like everyday look. That's also a look that you can recreate pretty easily with all different colors. I'm going to be using my Stone Cold Fox palette from ColourPop. I'm going to start with like a medium kind of taupey color. I'm going to dip it in the pan and tap off the excess so that there's not too much on the brush. And since I have hooded eyes, you'll notice as I go to raise my eyebrows, you can see lines where that eyeshadow primer is creasing. So first I'm going to go over that with the brush again to make sure those creases aren't there before I go in with my eyeshadow, because if I put powder down on it, it's gonna really lock in what that looks like. So you want to make sure you have the smooth surface when you go for it. And this color is gonna go right in where that crease is. So if my eyes are relaxed, I see where that fold lives, and so I'm going to come right in there with my eyebrow up so that this gets right in the crease there. And you'll see I'm first placing it where I want the pigment to go, and then I can start to do these small circular motions. And this is what I'm gonna call blending. We put down the pigment, and then we can blend it out. Put the color where you want it to live, and then we can tap around it or do the little small circles around it to help blend it out. This is very subtle, very light. I like to start with like a medium kind of shade just to add in some dimension, a literal eyeshadow, if you will. I'm gonna duplicate that on the other side. And now this is where, if you have really hooded eyes like I do, when I lower my eyebrows, this color disappears. It's literally in my crease, and my crease is so pronounced that you don't see it or you barely see it when I relax my eyebrows. Which is why if you're going to want that to show up and you have hooded eyes, you're not gonna raise your eyebrows when you put it on. You're going to apply it with your eyes relaxed right above that crease. It gives us the illusion of that crease and we still see the color. And then I'm not going to just blend that out to nowhere. I'm actually going to connect it to our outer corner here. And this, I'm just using little tapping motions. So I'm mostly blending this out from like right where the inner third of the eye would end, all the way to that outer corner in kind of like a, I guess it's like a big C. You can do eyeshadow in a V as well. You can do it with a harsh corner if you want to. I typically prefer rounder shapes on my eyes, but I think that's like with my personal eye shape. If you want to play around and experiment, you can see if you like a V or a C better. Here I'm doing this C shape, if you will, but you can do a we refer to it as a V. It's a sideways V. It's a V on its side. It's more like a greater than or less than sign. Either way, the C and the V will essentially have the same technique and the same shape to it. One will just be pointed at the edge where the other one is rounded. So once we have that color in place, then I'm gonna switch to a small detail brush. This one's kind of tiny and dome shaped. And I'm gonna use that to come in with a deep shade. I'm not using necessarily the darkest brown on this palette. I'm coming in with, I think it's like the second darkest brown in this palette. Personal choice, choose your own adventure. Again, I'm gonna load that on the brush and tap off some excess. And now this is where I'm going to split the eye into thirds horizontally. And I'm gonna tap this right on that outer third of the eyelid. So you'll see it's going to make kind of a triangle shape using the upper lash line as one edge of the triangle. But then once that is where I want it to be, again, I'm going to tap around the edge of that so that it doesn't have a harsh line to that triangle, but rather blends to just be a little dimension and a little shadow along the lash line. Doing the same thing on the other side. And here's where I'm not great with symmetry. This is one of the reasons I only do makeup on myself and not other people. But sometimes I just have to go back and forth between the eyes to make sure they do look the same or similar enough in terms of placement, in terms of amount of pigment, and things like that. One trick you can do if you're not really getting the blend that you want from a dark color to, we haven't put the light color on the middle of the lid yet, but if you want to get a more seamless blend there, you can come back in with that medium color and use that to blend the edge of that darkest color. This is definitely going to not get rid of, but definitely lessen the impact of that dark color. So I am going to come back in with a little more and reinforce that outer corner. This is where you can blend forever. You can play with amounts of pigment and how blended or how sharp you want your looks to be. And you can experiment day by day with which one you prefer, how you like your shadows to look, and things like that. And of course, there are plenty of different ways to do your eyeshadow. This is just like a basic look that looks good on most people. So we're starting here. Okay, so now that that outer third has a dark color on it and it blends up to the crease color, we're gonna come in with our lightest shade. I'm gonna take this on what we might call like a packing brush, a brush that has like a wide flat edge. And I'm going to take this matte color here. I'm not really a big like sparkle and glitter fan, but I'm gonna save that sparkly white that I have in this palette for the inner corner. But this color, I'm just going to take right at the center of the eyelid. You can do this with a shimmer, but again, I like to limit the amount of shimmers and glitters I use. Personally, I'm not a fan. Choose your own adventure. But if you are going to use shimmers or glitters, the eyelid is the place to use them most often. You can play around with what works for you, but I find shimmers or glitters in my crease don't really sit well. They separate easier, they crease more often, and what you really want to pop is that eyelid. So putting the shimmer or glitter on the eyelid is the best place to go. And again, between every step, you can come in with the other colors you've used. That's one of the reasons I use a different brush for every color that I'm putting on, so that I can take that medium shade to help blend from the dark shade to the light shade. This helps us add some dimension and immediately makes the look a little more elevated. And blend, blend, blend. Getting the right balance can be tricky, but honestly, you can do much simpler makeup than this if you want to. This is just a relatively easy to recreate option. And then the last thing we're going to do is highlight that inner corner. Like I mentioned, I'm going to take this white sparkly shade, and this is on a pretty detailed brush. The smaller brushes you use, the better for the smaller detail work. And this, I'm literally just going to tap right in that inner corner there and kind of swipe out from there to blend it away. And now you can stop there, add eyeliner, do your mascara, whatever you need. But I mentioned a lower lash line and I'm gonna use it. So I'm gonna use all the same colors that I used on the upper lash line. I'm gonna start on the outer third with that darkest shade. Kind of so there's a V from your upper lash line to your lower lash line of all the same color. And then I'm going to take that medium shade through the center of the lower lash line. Not afraid to overlap that with the darker color to help them blend one to the other. And then the color we used on the lid, I'm going to use right between that inner highlight and the medium shade. And you can play around with how much of this you want to use on the lower lash line. Sometimes I'll only do the darkest color. Sometimes I'll play around with which one is which. But you'll see, especially because of my hooded eyes, especially because I don't see a lot of my eyelid when I close my eyes, I still get the impact of that look when my eyes are relaxed because the same colors are on my lower lash line. Because like it or not, when I'm thinking about my makeup and I'm looking in the mirror, I can sit and stare at myself and raise my eyebrows and look like this. But most people see me like this. Most of the time when I'm talking, I mean, I'm very expressive and I might raise my eyebrows while I'm talking. But if I'm just like sitting and having a normal conversation with people, my eyes are usually pretty relaxed. From here we can add our eyeliner, we can add our mascara, we can do fake lashes if we want to, but those are all other pieces of our puzzle that we're going to put together over the next couple of weeks. So hit that subscribe button, let me know in the comments if you learned something new, and stick around as we make up for lost time.